My name is Courtney Wood. I'm the Economic Development Director for the Downtown Stockton Alliance, the 501c6 nonprofit property-based business improvement district serving downtown Stockton. This series is intended to connect our business owners, property owners, visitors, and residents with the organizations, people, and resources which impact our community. Today we have special guest, Dr. Michelle Rodriguez. She is the Superintendent of Schools for Stockton Unified School District, so I'm excited to chat with her today. We'll begin by having Dr. Rodriguez share a little bit about herself and how her background led her to working with SUSD. And from there, I'll ask her a list of questions I've outlined for her. And at the end, if there's time, we will go into viewer questions. And with that, welcome. Thank you so much for being our guest today, Dr. Michelle Rodriguez. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how it led you to working for SUSD.
Yeah, thank you so much. So appreciate you having me. So I come from a family of educators. So people often say that I probably was born meant to be an educator. So my father started out as a high school teacher and became, by the time I was in high school, became a superintendent. My mom was a alternative education teacher for many years, and later on in the end of her career was an elementary principal. So my whole life at the dinner table, I've heard about the power of education, the power of changing lives through education. And so for the last 32 years, I've been working in my family always talked about supporting children who don't necessarily have an advocate for themselves. So I support what I call vulnerable populations. So I started actually as a dual immersion teacher in Chico, California, so not too far from here. So I was a dual immersion teacher, then became a literacy coach, intervention teacher. So it's called a reading recovery teacher. So spent a lot of years in the classroom, and then finally started to go up the ranks in administration. So I've been in almost every position in administration. So I started out as assistant principal and went up. My last 14 years prior to arriving here, 7 before that was at Santa Ana Unified, which is a very urban. It was the 6th largest school district in the state. Stayed there for 7 years, went up the ranks to become the chief academic officer there, and then assistant superintendent of teaching and learning. Then was 7 years for the last 7 years at Pajaro Valley, which is the largest school district in Santa Cruz County, so has about 20,000 students. And I said that I would dedicate 7 years there, so I did do that. And then at my 7-year mark, Stockton Unified came up. I was really drawn to come and support Stockton, so I've said that I'm going to dedicate the last 8 years of my career. I've almost been here a year now. But I wanted to do that because, one, I wanted to have a continued profound impact on students, families, and the community. And as we all know, Stockton is one of the most diverse cities within the state of California, and has a lot of vulnerable students who I know their parents want us to rally around them to be an advocate for their children. And so I've been blessed to be here for the last 10 months and want to continue the work that we're doing with our 4,300 staff members every day.
Wow, a huge number of staff. And it sounds like basically from growing up to now, you have followed the path to where you are. I love to hear it. And you've been all over the state working with all different types of schools and all different types of positions. So you have a lot of experience. Very exciting. So can you tell us now about the vision, the origin, and the mission of Stockton Unified School District?
Yeah, so the mission itself comes from our board of trustees. So the board of trustees are the ones who set the vision of the district. Aligned with that actual mission statement, all the districts within California have something called the Local Control Accountability Plan. And so that's something that every school district within the state is doing a refresh of that right now. And so we just on Tuesday night, we had another engagement with Monday night, we had another engagement with families where we're really looking at what are those goals, because that local control accountability plan is our strategic direction plan, right? So that's the plan in which we will look at those goals and then those action steps. So the reason why I'm focusing on that is because the origin of all that is actually our stakeholders. So what we want to do is make sure that we are listening to our students, our parents, our staff, and our community, and hearing what is it that they believe that they need, that we need for their children, for our students, and then be able to move towards that. And so in June, we'll actually be releasing 8 brand new goals. They're very aligned. We released them already to our parent leadership groups, and then on Monday night to the parents who came to that session, that working session. And it's all based on really looking at the modern student. So when we talk to the 90 students within my superintendent advisory group, a lot of them talk about how education needs to change and morph to be aligned with not only the current world, but also what they hold as important. And so we're going to be talking a lot within our goals about aligning to their passions, interests, and talents, aligning with the modern student, with the student who no longer will just take a job in one sector anymore, but will actually have jobs in multiple sectors throughout their lifetime. And so how do we help build those thoughtful collaborators, those people that are problem solvers that can pivot and change jobs according to how their passions and their interests align? And so we're really excited to release that as we're continuing to listen to the feedback of the community, our students and our staff.
Wonderful, wonderful. So can you give us an overview of all of the services that SUSD provides? Because you are, responsible for so much. So tell us what exactly are you responsible for?
Yeah, so we have 14 divisions within the district. So there's the school district. We really believe in whole child, whole family, whole community. And so because of that, we have to have staff that support all those things. So obviously, when you look at the academics, right? So we have a whole cadre of staff that include obviously our teachers that are with students in the classroom, our instructional assistants that are with students in the classroom. And then at the district level, we have both professional development and a curriculum development that helps to ensure that we are providing these new programs. So one example is, for example, our career technical education services and programs are expanding dramatically. So as we're looking at, again, relating back to those passions, interests, and talents, that team is having to grow because those programs are going. And so obviously there's the academic that everybody assumes that we have. We actually have a very, very powerful student support division, and that includes both our counselors. So we have almost 150 counselors within the schools. And so one thing that is a definite strength of Stockton Unified is that we have a counselor in each one of our K-8s and multiple counselors at our comprehensive high schools, and then also at our alternative ed and our specialty high schools. We have counselors as well. So we have a large subset of people who are from the outside helping our students to determine what is best for them in terms of course sequencing, and then also helping for their supports. We have another layer of mental health clinicians. And so we actually have within the school district, we have our own subset of mental health clinicians who can do therapeutic level support. So counselors have a specific level that they can provide, and then we have mental health clinicians. And on top of that, we have what's called BCBAs, which is a type of very educated and advanced behaviorists. So they're one of our highest level of educational level for dealing with and helping students deal with their behaviors, their feelings, and what is happening with them. Then we have the health services department. So today is day of the school nurse and so we do have a large subset of school nurses that work alongside our healthcare assistants that are in each and every school to be able to provide for all those medical needs. So we have a very trained staff that help and support our students from everything from diabetes management and medicine management to just emergencies and the other things that are happening. Obviously, when you're thinking of safety, we do have our own police department, so we're fairly unique for this area, and we have our own police department, so Department of Public Safety, that's run by our Chief of Police, Chief Myra Franco. We have excellent officers. They're not only our SROs, which are our school resource officers, which are within the schools, but we also have our other officers, our sergeants, our lieutenant, and then of course our chief, who are outside of the schools, making sure and providing supports as one comes by. And so those are extremely important. Then obviously, because we are a school district, we do have business services that supports our staff, human resources that supports our staff. And then we couldn't do it without our IT department, who is who basically make sure that we're moving to a 2-to-1 ratio for Chromebooks. What that means is every child will have 2 Chromebooks as of next year. They'll have 1 Chromebook for home, and they'll have 1 Chromebook for the school. So we're making sure that they can do that. Because now that I've started to list all the services, I cannot forget the other subsection, which is our bus drivers. So we have our bus drivers. We transport over 3,000 students every single day. And they have been working very hard to make sure that we can improve the routes for our students, our maintenance and operations, and our custodial work that help support our families and our school sites. And then, of course, our food service workers, which provide meals to, or can provide. So all 35,000 students within the district have the ability to get free breakfast, lunch, and supper if they're in our after school program. And so our great families, and our students have access to that every day. And for families that need services outside when we're closed, or outside our family resource center, which is open daily, provides food, clothing, and support. So what I would say for services for families is, if anyone is in need of something, if they don't know where to find something that they need, I just encourage them to go to our Family Resource Center, which is off of Pacific Avenue. And we have wonderful staff there that have for years been very dedicated to the community, and they will help you find what you need.
Wonderful. Wow. So many branches. You talked about mental health, the curriculum, the actual education. You talked about safety, IT, food services. You're responsible for so much. And you mentioned there are 35,000 students.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then can you tell us how many schools are there in the district?
Yeah, so we have 55 schools. So we are a unique district in that we have all K-8s and then high schools. So we have K-8, so we don't have elementary and middle schools, but in total we have 55 schools, and that includes both our alternative ed schools and also our what we call our specialty schools. And so we're really fortunate in that we have a lot of options for families. And so what I would just say out there is, if your current site, if the current location is not working for your child, if the current environment is not working for your child, I really encourage you to go online under my webpage. You can also find it, but it's on there independently as well, and look at our specialty schools, because those are very unique, very small learning environments. A lot of times if you're at one of our comprehensive high schools, you are among thousands of children, right? And so if a environment in which you're one of 3,000 children is not working for you, is not working for your child, then I encourage them to go and look at our specialty schools. I will say that for next year, they are filling up very quickly. So we've been doing some exposure around that so that people even know the programs that we have. So they are filling up fairly quickly. This current year, we still have a lot of space in the majority of them. But for next year, they're filling up. So have that conversation with us because we will find something within our 55 schools that fits the needs of your child.
Wonderful. Thank you. And can you tell us a little bit about how the school district is funded?
Sure. Yeah. So all the school districts within California are funded by local control accountability funding. So it's called an acronym. So sometimes we talk, especially as educators, we talk in acronyms, but it's called LCFF. So there is three main buckets of funding at the state level. So we receive both state and federal funding. So at the state level, for most school districts, and I'm trying not to get too complicated, but there are basic aid districts. So those are districts that live in very affluent areas that actually don't depend on the state for their funding. They use just property tax. And then you have the grand majority of the 1,000 school districts that depend on the state and federal government for their funding. So we are one of those. And so we receive 3 levels of funding. So it's base funding. So that's funding that is, a lot of times you'll hear the words general fund. So that's base funding that basically can be used for anything. For most school districts, about 90% of that funding is used on people. And then as a school district that supports vulnerable populations, we receive both supplemental and concentration money. So you receive supplemental monies for students with additional needs. Those are the ones that I frequently name as vulnerable populations, but they are specified in the state. So those are students with disabilities, English learners, homeless, and also foster youth, homeless and foster youth. And so those students, for those students, we receive supplemental funds in order to be able to support them. And then if you have a certain amount, over 55% of students that are in that category, then you receive what's called concentration money. And so schools within the district receive those 3 levels of fundings. It is dependent on not only the number of students enrolled, but their attendance rate. So as California has declining enrollment, then that is a double impact on all your funds. So most school districts in the state of California, now about 85% of them are declining enrollment. In this area, there are some school districts that aren't declining enrollment because we do have some housing development that's here in the area, but most of that development is not occurring within Stockton Unified boundaries. And so for us, we are declining enrollment. And then from the federal government, we receive as well what's called categorical funds. So you may hear like Title I, right? Title I is specifically for students of poverty and also English learners and other vulnerable populations. So that money needs to be specifically used for over and above the base of what you're doing. So school finance is actually extremely complex, which is why it's hard sometimes for the average community member to understand, because our money is very much earmarked for different things. So we receive pretty significant funding, but then it has to be earmarked for different things. In general, it's not the only thing that has fairly no strings attached to it is your base funding, which is your general fund.
Very interesting. Thanks for explaining all the different pots of funding. Yeah, if it's coming in for a particular purpose, you have to spend it, for that purpose. So I can see why that could be a challenge. So in your opinion, what are the opportunities and challenges facing Stockton Unified today?
Yeah, so we actually have already identified them. So I'd encourage people, I know we won't have time to really go into it, but I encourage people to look at our public accountability dashboard. So it's all of SAUSD.net. And then in Spanish, it's todos juntos en SUSD.net if you want to go see it in Spanish. So that is our 44 priority recommendations. So if you go in there, those 44 priority recommendations were actually developed through 21 listening sessions and town halls I did during my first 3 months here. And so something that was important to me is that we're not just going to do what I think needs to happen, but we're actually going to look at data and listen to people and hear what is happening. And so because of that, if you go on that public accountability dashboard, what you'll see is 44 of them. A subset was to be done by 6 weeks, and those all got done. Another subset was to be done by March 1st, and those all got done. Another subset is to be done by June 1st, and those will be done. And then there is another subset, they're called level 4, in that those are the ones that we need to continue to move forward on, that will take longer than just my first year as superintendent. And so I'll just speak to 2 of those because I know we don't have too much time. So one is chronic absenteeism. So our chronic absenteeism rate has continued to decline this year. And so that is good. But we still have 39% of our students have still missed 10 or more days of school. So if you are a student and you have missed more than 10 days, then that means that you are considered chronically absent. And so we really want to focus in on that. We have an extremely dedicated team, and they're called Child Welfare and Attendance Team. So there's only almost 50 of them that day in and day out, they are dedicated to working with getting those students within the school, back in the schools. But we also need the support of the families and the community to really understand the importance of having children return back to the schools. So since the pandemic, we have seen, and it is a nationwide trend, but we have seen that since the pandemic, there is much greater increase of chronic absenteeism throughout the state and the nation. So we really want to encourage families that when their child, even their kindergartner, I know it's hard when they're 5 and you're thinking it can't be that important, but one day of kinder actually, or any day of school, it means that you've actually missed 2 days of instruction. And so you might say, how is that possible? But what they've shown is when you miss a day of instruction, it actually takes you time to catch up on what you have missed. So if you miss 10 days of school, and then you actually are missing 20 days of school, right? And so chronic absenteeism is something that we're really going to focus on. We realigned our admissions and our child welfare attendance departments so that they're more collaborating together and working together. We also unfortunately did have to restart back up our SAR process, and that's where we're working with the district attorney in order to help support those families who have significantly chronic absenteeism, because we need to get children to school. And so chronic absenteeism is something that we are significantly focusing on. And then the second is safety. So we are, I can send it to you, so maybe you guys could post it later. But if you go on to my superintendent website, you will see a infographic about all the safety measures that we are doing this year in order to ensure that our schools are safe. And so we just started with that process and it will be in every school, which are called access control. So very similar to the ring button. That happens at the house. When you push the button, the person will be able to see and talk to you, and then they will buzz you into the school at that point. So you won't be able to just walk into the school. Once you get in there, we already are implementing a new system called Hall Pass. So we are checking everyone. You do have to have a photo ID. It doesn't have to be a California or United States ID, but it does have to be a government issued identification. And we are checking to make sure that anyone who is coming through our schools is not a convicted sexual predator, or that they don't have significant other things on their record that might come up through that review. And so that's happening. And then once you get into the schools, we're significantly increasing the quality and the number of cameras within our schools. So an example, we did an audit of each one of our schools to determine where we needed to put additional cameras. And we're putting over 100 new cameras in Cesar Chavez High School alone. So we're increasing. The beauty of those cameras is twofold. One, it is connected with our Department of Public Safety. So our Department of Public Safety actually can bring up all those cameras. So that is a positive. And then two, it's also directly linked to the Hall Pass system that I just mentioned to you. So when you come in, you get it, you have a picture taken of yourself. And then once you're on campus, if I need to find you, I can through that picture, right? And through those cameras. And then last two things, I know I'm being long-winded, but I want you to get the information. The next is we are implementing a system called Catapult, which is already in process. But what that allows us to do is to, within a push of the button, we can send it everybody to their phone, let every staff member in the site know that we're on lockdown, let them communicate. Wow. Let them check in. So remember when we had all the storms and people were going in and doing I'm okay, I'm safe check-ins through Facebook and other ways. Well, now we'll be able to do that for our staff and students through the Catapult process. And then the very last thing, which we just implemented starting May 1st, is Sandy Hook Promise, see something, say something. So it's an anonymous reporting process in which anyone, but we're encouraging students mostly, but anyone can actually do a tip. And that tip line through Sandy Hook Promise is open 24/7. So there are people 24/7 who are monitoring those tips coming in. And then depending on the severity, then it's given either to our Department of Public Safety, so our police officers, or it's given to a site principal or a counselor, depending on the level and of severity of the tip. And so we're really excited that those are some new things that we're doing. So I would say those are two things that are very important to us as we're moving forward.
Wonderful. So a lot of focus on safety, making sure people have those resources and they know where to report, and then trying to make sure that kids are in the schools actually coming to school. I love that. I'm curious, in the past, I know that Stockton had a lot of concerns around literacy. Can you tell us, what kind of progress has been made in the Stockton Unified regarding literacy?
Yeah, so really some really tremendous progress has been happening in the last couple of years. So even prior to my arrival, they had begun to implement SIPs. And so we have a very strong curriculum and instruction department that was working alongside teachers teachers and staff in terms of SIPs. So SIPs is a mastery-based program, phonics program. And the reason why, so I implemented SIPs in my past district and my past district before. So Santa Ana and Pajaro Valley, both, I implemented them there both. The reason why SIPS is so important is often, and you're fairly young, so maybe you didn't have this happen, but when I was a child, at least, sometimes the teacher taught something and it was my responsibility as a student to learn it, that when she taught it to the whole class, right? And so what we know is, one, whole class doesn't work for all children because children are at different levels. And then two, it's not just the fact that I taught it to you, but it's the fact that you learned it, right? So the reason why SIPS is so important is because SIPS is small group instruction for the most part. So it occurs in small group, generally under the size under 9. So it doesn't have to be 5 or 6, but under 9. And it's grouped by the child's proficiency level. So there are these tests that children take. And they're called mastery tests. And if the children don't pass those tests, then they're not supposed to be just moved on. And so something that we're doing, so we're continuing this large effort this year. Something new that we've been doing this year is really focusing on job embedded coaching of that. So the training of staff is super important when you're implementing a new curriculum. And so we're really proud of the teachers and the staff and the work that they're doing around that. And they're seeing incredible results in terms of that. So I was just at McKinley Elementary just yesterday, and a teacher came in talking about how well her children were doing on the local assessment. And she was talking to her principal, but Ms. D'Alba, but she was talking about how SIPS really was working. And so we just have to remain steady in that work. And so next year, SIPS will be part of our core program. And so that will mean that every child will be involved in SIPS, K2, and then we'll expand it as needed. And then next year, years ago, they used to have intervention teachers. They stopped them. And so next year, we're going to be reinstituting, using some of those concentration funds that I was mentioning to you. We're going to be implementing intervention teachers. And what that will allow is when children don't meet those mastery level tests, then they will be given what we call a double dose or distributed practice, where they're going to be able to have someone that says, let me help you teach it, not the exact same lesson, but a different lesson, but on the same concepts, so that we can keep you moving forward. And so I think that the challenge is when you're working on K1, K2, sometimes it's hard to see that improvement for a couple of years, right? Because it has to move up. But I'm very certain that if we continue to be consistent and we continue to focus on mastery-based instruction that is personalized and individualized to children need, that we'll continue to see great results. So the staff is working really hard, both at the district level and the sites level, to ensure that we're taking care of that, because I think all the statistics show us, right, that we need to make sure that by third grade, they can be reading at grade level. And so that's going to be one of our main goals for sure.
Wonderful. It's wonderful to hear that you've implemented, a new program, a new way of meeting students where they are and ensuring that they're actually learning the content and not just passing them along. That's wonderful. I'm so happy to hear it. Can you tell us now, about your role as superintendent, what you're responsible for, and some of the changes you've made so far, and then what your goals are looking like for the next 1 or 2 years?
Yeah. So I'm finishing now my 8th year as a superintendent. So I have 7 years in PV and then now a year here. I think something that I learned as I went up the ranks, and that's one reason why it's kind of good to know my background, but went up the ranks, is that I, as superintendent, I too need to be in the schools knowing what is happening, right? So just like yesterday, I was in 2 schools. And so I think it's really important that I too am walking in the classrooms to confirm my assumptions, right? So I have, as we mentioned, there's 4,300 staff members who are working every day for children in Stockton Unified. And so I need to make sure that the people who are managing them, right? So managing, there's layers that are managing and supporting and supervising the employees, that I actually understand what truthfully is happening within the schools. So too often, I think superintendents become disconnected. And so for me, something that's very important, which is why I work very long hours, but I go into the schools every day. So I think that that is important, because then I can confirm when people say something is happening, then I can say, oh, I did see that, I validate that, or that's not what I heard, or when I talk to students. And so I think part of my role is making sure that I continue to have a pulse on the organization, so that when we're making decisions that are set in the reality of what is actually happening within the system. So I would say that's very important. The next one, which is why I mentioned the public accountability dashboard, is to help the district focus, right? So it is very, very easy to, with any school district, but especially a large urban school district, it is very easy to become fragmented and not be laser focused, and then therefore not get the outcomes that you want. And so that's why we established the 44 priority recommendations, because there's a lot that we could do, but we have to decide what is priority first, get it done, and then move forward, right? And so I think when we look at that, that's why I made all those commitments, and I was willing to put it out publicly, because I want people to know, when people say, what is she focusing on? I want them to actually be able to see, oh, this is what she says she's focusing on, and then she's doing it. Because I am superintendent 14 and 19 years. And so because of that, there's been a lot of turnover. And what that turnover has caused is it's caused a lot of people to say that they were going to do things, and I'm sure that they had the plan to do them, but then didn't stay long enough to actually implement them. And so part of that, if you look at the 44 priority recommendations, they are being done by 11 different divisions. So part of it is making sure through leadership meetings, through extended cabinet meetings, that the staff that is working at the district level is also all moving in the same direction, right? That we all know what our part is in improving the system, and then we're all moving towards improving that system. And then obviously something that is very important is budget. And so something that so I am a curriculum and instruction person, but I do have a skill set in business services as well. And so something that is very important is we're looking at, especially currently this year in my position, is looking at operational efficiency. So where can we provide the exact same type of service, the exact same thing, but instead of doing it one way, we're going to do it a different way, and we're going to wind up saving us money. So an example of that is when I got here, we were using a lot of outside consultant agencies. And they are very, very expensive. And so because of that, we removed the majority of those consultant agencies, and we instead hired staff in that position. So basically you were able to take a contract with a high cost consultant that might have been for $400,000 or $500,000, and I was able to replace it with a singular person that wound up costing the district $150,000, right? So you have the exact same level of service and the exact same, and it's actually improved service, but now you have that net, right? Which is a benefit, because that money now is no longer used for that purpose, and now can go back into the system, whether it's for salaries or it's for other services for students.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for describing that. And it sounds like you've already taken the reins and really helped to provide that focus to the district. Wonderful work that you're already doing. As people are listening, they might be inspired to support the work of SUSD. Do you have job opportunities or volunteer opportunities available?
Yeah, so we are still hiring. We did have a hiring fair that was extremely successful last on Saturday. So we hired 53 people just on Saturday alone. So we are doing well, but we are. If you care about benefits, we are the highest paying school district in the county by far. So I'd encourage you to look at a recruitment flyer that we just put out. But we have multiple positions. I will say that if you are even someone who only wants to give a few hours but wants to make an impact in the lives of children, we have everything from the need for crossing guards to instructional assistants to noon duty who are out with children. And so you don't need to have a degree in order to be able to work for children, whether it's food and nutrition services or others. We obviously still, whether it's teachers or counselors, we are adding 14 mental health clinicians for next year. And so we are looking for mental health clinicians because we received a grant and we are adding 14 additional mental health clinicians. So I just encourage you to go on our human resources website. We will be having another fair in June. And so hopefully as you're driving around Stockton, you see our big banners. And so we hope that you can come out to Edison High in June if you want to be part of the SUSD family. If you don't want to wait, all of our job openings are on edjoin.com. So edjoin, join.com. So edjoin.com. And that will show you all the different openings that we have. And we, especially in education, something that you will see is that we change not only the lives of our students, but the lives of our families through their children. So hopefully people will want to continue to be part of the SUSD family.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so I know we've only got a few minutes left, so I'll try to just get through maybe a couple more of my questions, and we might have time for one of your questions.
Okay.
We know that SUSD now owns quite a bit of land right here in downtown Stockton, over on the western end of the district. And we love having you guys here. We love, seeing those buildings here and having you in our downtown. So my question for you is, why do you think downtown Stockton is a great location for the SUSD, so many SUSD offices? And do you have a favorite downtown lunch spot or coffee spot?
Yeah, so, I think when you think of Stockton, I think luckily I work right here in downtown. It's really very close to so many of our schools, so many of our families. So when I think about where we should be as a school district, we should be where parents can access us. And so I think having us here in downtown, having many of our buildings very close to our families, to our schools, allows for our families to actually receive those services. So whether it's the Family Resource Center or it's the Madison building, right? All of those are areas that are so close to the community and the heart itself of our school district. And so we're just excited to continue to look at some of the buildings that are possibly not being used as well as they can or as often as they can, and how do we make them true hubs for the community. So looking at the Madison building, we're going to be doing an inspection of that to think about, can we even partner with outside groups and make the bottom floor a museum, right? How can we continue to look at the buildings that in some cases aren't used to its full capacity, and how can we make it a location where families and community wants to go, and where there's these additional resources. And so we're really inspired to continue to work with the city of Stockton, with you all at the Economic Development Center, and how can we make Stockton continue to be a place that is great to raise children and our families.
Wonderful, wonderful. Do you have any lunch spots or coffee spots downtown?
I rarely go out to eat because I don't have time. So I just can't remember. You probably know the name of it. They will be like, why don't you know the name? I do love the sushi place that's right by the center.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Yeah.
Misaki, yeah.
So I do go there whenever my husband and I have time that coincides for lunch, because it's really close. That is my favorite place. They have great sushi there, so if you want to go. And then I'll do one more plug, because I just know the name. Also, the Greek restaurant that is right down the street from there has some of the best Greek food around. So, and they're quick. So if you need to get in and out for a lunch, they're really quick too.
Thank you. Thanks for the shout out. Lovely downtown spot. Okay, so we're running really close to the end. So I do see there is at least one question that I want to just get to. This is about special ed. So this is a question from YouTube. This is from Rainbow Renee. So thank you, Rainbow Renee. Yeah. She just is curious, what does SUSD do for special ed?
Sure. So we actually have the full range spectrum of special education here in the district. So many school districts that are smaller wind up sending their children out to what's called non-public school. For us, we maintain them. So we have everything from what we call our PAC, which is our preschool assessment center. So from the very young age of babies, we are already providing services. So if families feel that they need they feel like something is happening with their child, they can actually we can assess and find that out through our preschool program. So we have that, which even has autism programs. So we have the full spectrum in K-8s. So they're not in every school. So depending on children's needs, then they are then placed in programs. So for example, Marshall Elementary has our full spectrum of our autism program. And so they have autism program at each level within that school. Actually, Marshall Elementary, shout out to them, because almost half of their entire staff is is part of the special education program. And so they're significant. We also have the TIS program. So the TIS program is aligned with children who have some social emotional needs. That does range up to emotionally disturbed, doesn't have to be that. And then obviously there's the spectrum. So there's some children who are what we used to call RSP, so resource students, that only need a specific resource. So they're in general education classrooms and they receive just the services that they need, which might be speech, might be occupational therapy, might be some pull-out support. And then from there, there's moderate to severe. So those are students who have a little bit more extensive needs than just students that are in resource. And those students then receive a higher level. We do try to do inclusionary practices. So we try to keep them in general education classrooms as much as possible and do as much push-in support as possible instead of pulling them out. Because kind of similar to the absence that we were talking about, when you pull a child out, they are missing the instruction that's happening within that classroom. And then we have what's called moderate to severe. And so those are students who have more significant disabilities. They could be physical or academic needs. And so there's then the range within that. And so we have she's just been doing it for about a year, but we have, a great new director of special education that's really trying to look at how can we continue to support students. We are increasing the level of the number of paraprofessionals by quite a bit for next year, because we're seeing that we need to provide a little bit more individualized support to our students. So going back to, if you want to join the team, we have quite a few instructional assistant brand new positions that we have open. But everything in special ed is linked to a child's IEP, which is their individual educational plan. And so it then becomes where's the best placement for that child so that they can get it. But just a plug for inclusionary practices. We know that children are general education children first, right? So they should be in general education classrooms in the least restrictive environment as much as possible, and then receive those services over and above, because the more that they are with like peers, and the more that they are able to receive grade level instruction with supports, the more they will succeed and then wind up being able to exit out of special education. So
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for answering that question. And thank you, Rainbow Renee, for the question. Okay. Do you have time for one more question, or would you like to wrap up?
Well, okay. I know we had a technical difficulty, so
I know. Sorry about that. Okay,
yeah,
so this is one more question. It's from Mike Huber. He says, hi, Dr. Rodriguez. What is the timeline for completion of the other SUSD buildings planned for the properties on Market and Washington? It's very exciting for downtown. So he's wondering about a timeline.
Yeah, so we are just finishing up a facilities master plan. So the facilities master plan, the findings of that facility master plan will be released on the last week of May. And so within that, what will happen is it will tell us it will rate each and every school site, and it will rate each and every property in terms of the critical level of timeline, meaning the importance of that. And then from there, then the board will then look at that and then look at how are we going to allocate the $400 million that we have of bond funding to implement those programs. And so the timelines will be determined based on the priority recommendation. So unfortunately, what we know is we have about $800 to $900 million worth of need for facilities, and we have about $400 million in bond funding. And so I will be able to give specific timelines on on which school sites we're going to do first and which properties we're going to do first. And then also what projects we're going to do within those properties after the release of the facilities master plan. So I know I didn't necessarily answer the question, but if you touch bases back with me, Mike, after the last week in May, I can give you the answer to that question. So
okay, so upcoming, still in the works. Thank you.
Yeah, it is, but I will say that we did receive the bond money years ago, and we are now going to be prepared to spend it smartly, right? If that's the word.
There you go. Wonderful. A comment from Rainbow Renee. She just says, shout out to Edison's special ed class with Mr. Mario. My son has been so happy there this year. So wonderful.
Well, I'm glad that your child's doing well. So yes, thank you for supporting your child. I'm sure that that's part of it as well. So we need parents to be aligned with us. So thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so thank you anyone who typed a question, and we did get started a little later due to a tech issue, so we're going to have to wrap up because I know that Dr. Rodriguez has other commitments. But before we close out, I just want to say if there's one important takeaway regarding the work of SUSD or education in our community, that you would just love people to take away from this interview, what would you like that to be?
So I say it every time that I said it on stage at Cinco de Mayo, and I'll say it here because I truly believe it. I think if we work together, anything is possible, but we are going to all need to work together. So the school district, the parents, staff, the community partners, if we put our minds together and if we work together towards the betterment of children with a focus on what's best for children, not what's best for adults, but what's best for children, we will be able to turn anything around that we want, right? So I just really encourage people, we are listening, we do want you involved. So I just encourage people to continue to come out, continue to believe in our children, believe in our students, and have that positive growth mindset so that we can make the impact. Because to make sustained change, it's going to take each and every one of us. And I hope you'll join us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Rodriguez. I really appreciate having you on to chat with us, to answer all of our questions. And I also just want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing. You're doing such important work for our community. So thank you so much for your time and for your work. And thank you for the audience for tuning in. And just to remind everyone that this video has been streaming live to YouTube and LinkedIn, although not at the original link. We had to send out a new link. Where we are at downtown Stockton, and it has also been streaming live to X, where we are at downtown STKN. And with that, thank you again, Dr. Rodriguez. I'll let you get back to the rest of your schedule. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, take care, everybody. Okay.
Have a great day downtown. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Take care.